Hello and welcome to Just Films and That with me, Josh Hallam.
And me, Alice Oliver. This is the podcast where we talk about films that we think are underrated, underappreciated, or we just wanted to talk about them.
We're also going to get stuck into some classic films that one of us maybe hasn't seen and maybe throw in some great guests along the way. So we start with a random question. Alice, do you prefer to drive or be driven? That's not a euphemism. In a car, do you prefer to be the driver or be driven?
Oh, in a car. Okay. You know what? I do enjoy driving. I started driving quite late. I didn't learn until I was 25. And I suppose it kind of gave you a real sense of independence and freedom then, because I was 25 years old. Like, I should have learned to drive by now. So I've always really enjoyed it. But the odd time that I am a passenger, I do find that very relaxing as well. And it does, if you imagine yourself being chauffeured around and that you're quite fancy and that maybe, you're quite well off or whatever. But which one would I prefer? I think I prefer to drive. You're in control. You know where you're going. You can ignore everyone else. What about you?
I'm the same. I prefer to drive. It's not that I'm not a bad passenger or anything like that. I just prefer to drive. I quite enjoy driving, apart from obviously when I don't like being stuff in traffic and all the stuff that comes with driving. But quite a lot of the time, I like to drive. It took me a long time to pass my driving test.
Really?
I was 18, but it did take me 4 goes.
4 goes?
Yeah,
Ooh.
to pass my driving test, because don't get me wrong, right? First 2. Yeah. I definitely should have failed. I was no ready to take the test.
Oh, what happened? Did something really?
First one, I cocked up on a junction and I can't remember. It was a set of lights into oncoming traffic, and it did.
Oh God!
It wasn't massively dangerous. It didn't stop the test or anything. Second one, it was just a collection of minors that built up. The third one, I can't even remember what it was, but I just remember thinking the guy was being a bit of an arsehole about it.
Oh,
and not
really?
in even my driving instructor went, what? He finally wanted rid of me, the driving instructor. But
it's I gotta keep teaching this guy.
And then, fourth go round, I passed, and felt like the angel started singing when he told me he passed. So yeah, I think because of all that effort, perhaps I prefer to drive, but also I do quite enjoy driving.
It's a bit of a treat, isn't it?
So this week's film is Natural Born Killers, which was 1994, I think. So spoiler warnings for that if you've not seen it. Alice, you chose this one, so give us a little background on it. What's it about? Who's in it? And then why did you pick it?
Okay, so the film is about Mickey and Mallory. Mickey is a troubled young butcher who stumbles across Mallory in her very, very miserable life. And he sort of whisks her away on an adventure of violence and debauchery. And we sort of see that unfolding on the screen. It's got Woody Harrelson as our main man, Mickey, and Juliette Lewis as Mallory. And we get some appearances. We've got Robert Downey Jr., we've got Tommy Lee Jones. Yeah, I was going to say Tommy Lee Cooper then. I was who's that? Tommy Lee Jones, come on. And it all ends, well, I suppose it's a happily ever after for our main characters,
in
really.
A way.
Yeah.
In a way, I suppose. So, why did you pick this? Why did you pick it?
I picked this one, I think, more as an unseen. So most people I speak to haven't seen it. If I ask them if they've seen it, it's usually no. In terms of underrated, I'm not so sure. I've managed to avoid that, so you can surprise me with that at the end.
Absolutely, we'll come on to that.
And it was one, when I saw it for the very first time, would have been, I think, maybe 2010, 2011. It had a real impact, and I kind of wanted to see if it still had that impact, and it definitely did.
So funny you should say that. I hadn't seen this. I actually had it on DVD, as you can see, because it's by the telly.
Oh, there he is, Woody.
Yeah. But I've had this in my DVD collection for many years and never got round. So it's one of those, I've bought it probably in some sort of offer thought I've always wanted to see that and never got around to watching it. So I was really interested to sit down and watch it because going into it as someone who hadn't seen it, I knew a lot in terms of the basic premise, the cast, the director, and I was kind of going in expecting a kind of I suppose ultra violent modern take on Bonnie and Clyde, which I think it's fair to say is what I got. So watching it again, what did you think?
I just thought it was exquisite. When I came away from it the very first time I saw it, because I wanted to be a filmmaker back in the day, and that was the first film that I ever saw that made me think, oh my God, I want to make films. It's just such an assault on all the senses, and it's relentless all the way through. But I'm really interested to know what you felt coming away from it, because I didn't know you hadn't seen it. That's interesting.
Overall, I really enjoyed it. I think I had that exact phrase written down here, which you just said, which is it's an assault on the senses. It really is. It makes you feel like you're being kind of battered by the film, like emotionally and visually, I suppose is the best way to say it. I like the overall aesthetic of it. I like how it looks, and I like how kind of visceral the violence is, how kinetic it is. The way, I think what I do like about it is how it is so stylized, and they use that stylization to not soften the message of the film, which is what you might think it would do, but actually heighten the message of the film. So if you've not seen the film, there's like elements of it that are very, very stylized, very kind of out there and weird and wacky. So I went into it wondering what angle were they going to play this and what it actually was. I think what it is ultimately is a satire on the way that the media treats people who engage in horrendous crimes. It is so colourful and quick, and the cuts. I was reading, I think, before we started recording, that the average film has so many cuts, and this is something outrageous, like 10 times more or 7 or 8 times more, and it really shows. Like there are times when you feel like you're in a bizarre dream or a nightmare, which is, I think, on purpose. So I really like that. I really loved the cast, because Juliette Lewis has obviously she was in Dusk Till Dawn. I've not seen her in much else. I've only really seen her in bit parts in more modern films, more comedic roles. And I know she's a rock star as well, but she's so young in this. And for me, I thought she was probably the standout performer. Woody Harrelson's good, and I think Woody Harrelson is pretty much always good, even in bad stuff, with exception to the end of Venom, when he's horrendous.
Oh, you're not a fan, eh?
It's just mental. Anyway, I think he's really good. But I think she was a standout. Robert Downey Jr. in a kind of pre-prison, pre-sobriety, drug-fueled haze. I mean, it's hard to say, because the stylization is such that everyone is performing these. Everyone's turned it up to 11. So all the cast are kind of like doing this Kafka-esque nightmarish style performance where they're snarling and shouting and their eyes are popping out their head. So I can say, around, so pre-sobriety Robert Downey Jr., but it's a directed piece of film. He's clearly doing that on purpose, because as is Tommy Lee Jones, as is Tom Sizemore, all the other characters in it. So I thought the cast was brilliant. It's funny, I was watching Tommy Lee Jones' performance and thinking, I've not really seen him like this before. Like, normally he plays such stoic, kind of almost military style men, or you've got like Men in Black, and he's all very, very much like, what you get with Tommy Lee Jones. I was like, no, I've definitely seen him something where he's like this animated. I realized it was Batman Forever. It's like the only other time. Yeah, it was when he's Two-Face.
Yeah,
it's like the only other time that he's like cackling and like he's doing this huge animated performance. So we'll come on to the other stuff that I quite enjoyed. I'm interested to know, what did you think of the performances, having watched it again?
Oh, exquisite, brilliant. Juliette Lewis is phenomenal. And then I wrote immediately underneath that, all the performances are outstanding. Like you say with Tommy Lee Jones, he just embodies rage completely.
He's not even in it that much.
No.
He's probably in it for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes
just near
overall.
the end there.
Yeah.
But he blasts on. He's just, as soon as he enters the screen, he's just like, pow, I'm here. And he's just furious the whole time, and like getting up in people's faces and like screaming at everybody. They they're all very wild. All the characters are so wild and they're so intense in their own ways, whether it's like full of rage or just incredibly violent or, you know, drugged off their face. Everyone is so intensely affected by the demons that they have, because obviously it's such a big part of the narrative is these demons, and Mickey, sorry, is trying to outrun these demons. But yeah, brilliant. But yeah, Juliette Lewis, fantastic, so young.
I think she's about 21.
Is she really? Yeah, she looks very young as well,
Yeah.
which really adds to the impact of the story and her obviously storyline of being horrifically abused by her dad, and her mum just sort of stands by and watches. It's just all.
And maybe being her brother's mum.
Yes, yeah, that's certainly
hinted
at. Yeah.
It would have been very easy when making this film. It's a difficult line to toe in terms of making it too much and making it impactful. And I do think it walks that line really well. What do you think of stuff like the more practical elements of like how it looks? And I don't mean, we talked about the camera, we talked about the cuts. What did you think about the music, the costumes, that sort of thing?
Music was fantastic. They were all songs, like I was trying to pick up on if I recognized the songs or if I knew the songs as it went. And I think maybe there was one or two in there, but they were otherwise just kind of generic songs that just really embodied like the feel of the film very well. Not generic, I don't think that's the fair term to use, but ones that I hadn't heard but were very kind of specific to their genre.
I think that's what you mean, not generic, it's the genre, it's the kind of bluegrass twanging guitars and the almost like slow country music style. Obviously it's set in the well, does it ever actually say where it's set? I think it's meant to be the kind of Bible Belt America.
Yeah, it's really like a really forgotten about sort of just left to rock kind of place. And that's sort of why these things are happening to these people.
So the music's great. Costumes as well, because there's a lot of costume changes for Mickey and Mallory, because I think what it kind of does is it treats them in its role as a satire, it treats them as superstars. So in the way that you might see a pop star go from rags to riches, they treat them in that way because they're murderers, and that's why it's a satire. So it starts and they're in like really scruffy clothes.
Oh, well, Mickey, when he's introduced and he's covered in blood and wearing his butcher's whites. Oh, my goodness. What way to introduce a character. And obviously, because of the backdrop of the sitcom, he's introduced as the hero. Like, he slams through the front door and it's like, woo, from the audience. And he's the knight in shining armor here to rescue her. But he's just as fucked up as she is. And he's not about to take her on some fairy tale. Or maybe he is, if you want to look at it that way.
But also, what the real genius of that scene as well, the sitcom scene, is that the impact of that scene is based in who is in it. Mm-hmm. So they use a 50s sitcom aesthetic, like an I Love Lucy style sitcom where, you know, the dad's giving the wife stick and the mum is treating the dad like he's a lazy bum and all that, and there's a laugh track and all the dialogue is set up like set up punchline laugh, set up punchline laugh. And they cast Rodney Dangerfield as her dad, and Rodney Dangerfield's like one of the biggest comedians in America's history. And then also Woody Harrelson got his start in Cheers.
Of course.
So it's almost using the baggage that those two actors come with against you to have that impact. So you know Woody Harrelson was in Cheers. Your brain kind of goes, well, this isn't right, because he's also sexually abusing his daughter and he's covered in blood. I remember kind of, again, reading about it and the director perhaps saying that Rodney Dangerfield didn't actually really know what was going on.
Okay. Oh,
he was
interesting.
He was given lines and just told to be a disgusting dad, but kind of not sure he entirely got the concept and was kind of just told to go and do his thing. I don't know, but it's peppered throughout with these really darkly comic moments. There's bits where you laugh and you're like, you shouldn't really be laughing at that because it's so dark. And I do think that's stuff like that, little doses of that in a film, are what gives it its impact, I suppose is the word. They really help with the satire of it. That's how you know it's a satire. It's not just overwhelmingly bleak. I think something that I did really like about it as well, which leads on from the message of the film, is that it's really thought-provoking. It's a film that I can imagine seeing in the cinema and coming away, and whether you like it or don't like it, it's definitely trying to say something. So you go away and have a think of what it is trying to say, and you kind of can talk to people like we are now. What do you think it's trying to say, I suppose?
I mean, a few things about the human condition, certainly. I think, obviously, Mickey keeps going on about these demons, and you get these very striking visuals of demons, and then Mickey as a demon, and he's all lit up in green and then red. And obviously the notion of celebrity comes into it, and the way that obviously the film views the media as vultures. So Robert Downey Jr.'s character he's like depicted as this scum of the earth because he's just like doing anything for the story. And the way that you sort of get those interviews from people from across the world going, we love Mickey and Mallory, from like loads of different countries and that. So I think that's kind of showing how when you make someone famous or you put that kind of celebrity on someone, are you doing it for the right reasons, and is making them a celebrity and making people obsessed with them more important than the reality of it, which is that they are two incredibly violent, incredibly dangerous people who are causing havoc for anybody who comes into contact with them. Like, Mickey's insanity is palpable, and it spills over from him into other people. Everyone he's around gets infected by this madness that's got him. And I think it's a lot to do with kind of showing you, I think it actually, maybe, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but it makes you sympathize with them in some ways, even though they're these hardened criminals and are, for all accounts, insane. You do sympathize with them because you get to know them, because you get to know what they've been through, like this abuse and these horrendous childhoods that they've had to live with. So I think I assume Oliver Stone is making a commentary on those things.
I think you're right. I think what I read is what you said was ultimately, whatever anyone says about it, his intention was that it was a satire on the media's treatment of mass murderers and criminals, basically. And I think there are elements where it strays into glorification, but I think ultimately it does do that. It is a satire on like the way they treat these two mass murdering, like you say, like really dangerous criminals, like they're kind of like One Direction or like one of the K-pop bands or something. Yeah. The way they create this hysteria, I suppose is the word, and the way that they affect people in terms of like that. So some people are talking about them as celebrities. All it takes is for them to kind of be in the prison, and all the other inmates are going crazy because they're there. And like you say, the way people like Robert Downey Jr.'s character feed off them like vultures around them, trying to parasitically eat some of the fame, I suppose, and make a name for themselves.
But then he gets shot at the end, so that wraps it up nicely.
Yeah, not just once.
Yeah, to pieces.
Yeah,
does he lose part of his ear, I think?
One thing I do think I did notice is it's clear to see some of the influence the film must have had, like on other films. I mean, I don't mean we'll come on to the question that inevitably will come up about copycats, but I think it really reminded me of, like, have you seen Bronson?
Yes.
Yeah, Bronson, Requiem for a Dream. Those were the two that was like, it's a film that is designed to both be thought-provoking, but also in taking you on this emotional journey, almost not mimic their feelings, but certainly wind you up. And it did that. In fact, probably not since Requiem for a Dream have I finished a film and been a bit like a bit wound up, because it's such an assault on the senses.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's every cut, every note, every piece of dialogue. It is. Oh, the whole thing is just such a frenzy. But as you know, the media makes frenzies of everything, and it's just kind of mirroring that.
So obviously, as you can probably tell from the title, the film is very violent. What did you think of the way the film treats violence? Like, at any point, did you find it to be almost numbingly overwhelming, too much violence, or did it continually keep its impact for you?
I didn't feel like it was too much for me. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the way it was put together. Sometimes it was just really nicely choreographed in the opening scene, I think, when they go into that diner and they just start tearing the shit out of everyone. It's such a great introduction to the characters, actually, because they start they're just sort of messing about with these guys. So these like three men or whatever, start trying to hit on Mallory. And she's doing like this slow, sexy dance to kind of wind them up. And she sort of punches one and then like maybe kicks another one in the nuts. But then Mickey gets out his gun, and then I think there's a knife, and she just starts like wailing on these guys, like probably beating the shit out of him. And it's like, okay, they're that kind of criminal. This is just like some fun time punches in the diner. And then from there, it's just just such a wonderful array of different violent techniques, like when they kill Mallory's dad and then they kill the mum and then they go on the rampage and they're in the when they're in the pharmacy getting the medicine and then the police come out and they're like trying to fight the police off and Mickey's like out there with one gun outnumbered by like 50 police officers or whatever, and then Jack Scagnetti starts just beating his face bloody. I really enjoyed the violence. I think it's just so stylish. And
yes,
a
it's
lot
the stylization of it, isn't it?
And a lot of it you do feel, because a lot of the violence happens to very bad people. Like we're introduced to all these characters and none of them are particularly nice. Everyone's full of hate and anger. And when they kill, so the first casualty is Mallory's dad. And when they kill him, it is satisfying because he's a fucking creep.
Yeah, he's awful,
he's horrible.
Yeah.
He's literally one of the most horrific, but like a brilliant like depiction of what I assume an abusive father is. But yeah, just like grotesque and horrible. And then they burn the mum alive on the bed, and that's also really satisfying.
That was horrible.
Oh yeah, horrible, grim.
We don't condone setting your mothers alive.
No, never, not at all.
On fire alive.
But then, in a wonderful kind of counterpoint to that, when they accidentally kill the Native American who's helping them, they're horrified. Like Mallory's like, bad, 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 like really having a go at Mickey. I keep going to call him Woody. His name is Mickey. And they feel really guilty about that. And that's the first time you see them feeling guilty in this whole film. So you kind of get a speck of them as humans. It's like, oh no, they are still people. They do still have feelings, despite them being on this rampage. Not that you don't sympathise with the crazed murderers. I know what you mean.
It's that you can't go so far as to say they only kill bad people, because they don't. They kill like store attendants and waitresses and stuff. And
anyone who's in their way.
Who they shouldn't kill, but there are times when, like you say, they kill people by accident.
It's an interesting moment because it's one that is completely away from the kind of frenzy and from the celebrity notion of it, and there's no one else around, and it's like they've gone to this, or they've ended up in this place. I think that they're hurt by this point, and the Native American sort of comes out and he tries to sort of calm them and kind of help them. Like he says that she has the sad sickness and that like he is a demon and that she should be saved from him and all this. But then because Mickey, like he's having a real bad dream where he's kind of hallucinating and he's like, I don't know what's real and what's not, and then accidentally fires his gun. And they're horrified at that. And I think that was quite an interesting moment in amongst all the carnage.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's when they mean to kill people and when they accidentally kill people. It's not a case of whether they did or did not deserve it. It's a case of their intentions, maybe.
But then alongside this intense backdrop of violence, you have these really intimate and like romantic moments between Mickey and Mallory. There are some scenes where there's like quite romantic music playing, or they're like having pillow talk with each other, or they'll sort of start kissing and dancing in the middle of like a scene of absolute horror. And that's really interesting as well. And I don't know if I'm sure it is trying to say something, but it is just it's quite satisfying, I find, to get that juxtaposition. It's like when you watch one of those nature shows, like Planet Earth or whatever, and they've got this massive orchestral like sound going on in the background. It's the complete opposite to what you're looking at. Like you're watching an ant crawl over a piece of wood, and then you've got these violins going crazy in the background. And I love that. And I think that really adds a lot to it when you've got these two completely opposing ideas hitting you in the head at the same time.
Yeah, I know what you mean. They kind of, you believe that they love each other, and they're almost like star-crossed, tortured souls. Yeah. I guess they bind each other in the misery. So, yeah, you do believe that they love each other.
Sort of. I mean, it's only 3 weeks, isn't it, that they're together until they get arrested.
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it?
But I'm sure they do love you. I mean, obviously, their own personal concepts of love are bound to be very fucked up because of what they've experienced as children. So, I mean, for Mallory, it was literally just anything but this, anything but my home life. I would like
some actual,
ready to do anything.
Not even unconditional love, some positive attention from someone.
Yeah, someone who isn't related to you, who finds you attractive.
Isn't abusing
That's the dream.
Me. But that is the dream.
But he's not very nice to her, really, either. And I think, again, it's just really sad that her standards are obviously so low because I'm assuming her self-esteem is torn to shit because of what's happened to her. And Mickey, they kidnap some woman, and he's like, what? So he and Mallory are having sex, and then he starts looking at this woman who's tied up in the corner, and she gets furious. And then that's when she fucks off and then gets head from some guy on the bonnet of a car.
And he kind of wants a threesome with this hostage, but then when she won't let him have one, he just kind of rapes the hostage.
Yeah. Not great people.
They're not great guys. No, they're not role models.
You wouldn't be friends with them. I don't think they are meant to be likable.
certainly wouldn't be like going out for a drink with them.
No, wouldn't risk it.
So having watched it again, then, was there anything you found that you either didn't like, or that you perhaps had not aged well, or?
I mean, not really. And I was trying to look. I was trying to see, is there anything that I'm not into, anything that I think, you know, it's hard to say anything I think that wasn't appropriate, because the whole film, if you want to, you know, in its own way is inappropriate. I mean, it's a film. In my mind, it can't be inappropriate. Like, this isn't meant to be taken as truth or as like some gospel that you should listen to or whatever. But no, I didn't. I loved it all. I think I made one note, I think, about something that I didn't like, and it was at the very end, when so Robert Downey Jr.'s character, Wayne, right? Is it Wayne?
It's Wayne Gale.
Gale, that's what. I kept going to say Wayne Gretzky, and I'm like, no, that's a different guy.
That's a hockey player.
Wayne Gale. So it ends, obviously, with those three, and they've, like, turned on Wayne. And then the last thing they say to him, and I haven't written the whole sentence down, so I can't remember the exact context. So at the very end of the film, they sort of turn to Wayne, and they're about to kill him, and they've got his camera, and I can't remember what the sentence is that leans up to it, but the last thing they say to him is, your camera, and they say it at the exact same time. And I just thought that was a bit cheesy, and I didn't like it. It kind of put me off a bit, but literally that was it.
It is like, that's a bit like, oh, we need a last line.
Oh, I think it was like, they're the only witnesses.
He says, Wayne Gale says to them, you always leave a witness.
Yes, he wants to be the only one left alive.
We did, your camera.
Your camera, and then they say it at the same time, your camera. And I was just like, this doesn't match up with anything that I've just been watching.
No, it's very like, we need a last line, so just put it in.
But so if one of them had said it, it would have been fine, and I probably wouldn't have picked up on anything. But because they both said it at the same time.
Unison.
Yeah, it just felt a bit lame.
There wasn't much I didn't like about it. I thought there was times when it was a little style over substance. So a little bit like all about the quick cuts and how can we do this in a stylized way rather than showing us more basic plot points. So it was at times, particularly perhaps like the first 45 minutes, where it was a little hard to follow, and it took me a little while to get my bearings. That's because it does ascent your senses. So I suppose it's the other side of that coin. Because it's such an assault on the senses, there are times when you have to kind of settle yourself and be like, oh, what's actually happening?
Yeah.
And I suppose to lead on from that, there is an element of the particularly ending going on a little long, and the violence being a little bit too, not that it's too violent, there's so much of it. However, the more I thought about that, and the more I thought about how I went dumb to it, and the more I thought about how it was a little hard to follow at times, I kind of wonder if that's the point.
I think so.
Particularly with the numbness to the violence, I think that what they're almost doing is showing you this satire of how the media treats criminals, and then as you become more numb to it, they're kind of saying, I don't mean to sound as wanky as holding a mirror up to society, but they're going, you know, all these horrific things that they do. Every single person they kill has family and friends and all that, and it's by the end they're just killing people willy-nilly. There's just guards and bodies piling up and people like impaled on the wall and blood everywhere. I mean, you're just kind of numb to it.
So I agree that with your observation completely. I don't agree that it wasn't a problem for me. It was part of the thrill of the film. It's like you kind of get sort of 20 minutes, 30 minutes in, and you're like, okay, maybe we'll calm down now and take a back seat. But no, it's still there. Like bam, bam, bam. Here's an image. Here's a sound. Here's like 3 million cuts in the space of 2 seconds. And it just adds to the frenzy of it. And I like it because it's not something that you see that often. And you come away from it just with such an intense feeling, whether it's repulsion, whether it's anger, whatever it is, just from being bombarded with all that information at once. But I really liked it about it, and it does kind of signal their sort of spiral and them going insane, because you feel like you're going insane with them.
It's also designed, I suppose, to wind you up as well. So I know what you mean. It's so frenzied. Maybe it's just that the amount of really, really quick cuts is a bit hard to follow at points, but I'd certainly felt there was more good than bad, and certainly came away like really very much thought provoking, and I loved the stylization of it. I also loved the quick cuts and the music and the way it looked. It's just that at points, I don't know, maybe I was just being a bit slow, a bit stupid. One thing I did want to pick your brains on, and I don't want to go too much into this and get too deep because neither of us are, as far as I know, qualified to talk about this. There was a lot of talk after the film and a lot of stories in the press about various supposed copycat incidents of killings. I know one of them was Columbine. Where do you stand on the idea that a film or piece of media like a video game can cause copycat killings or copycat behavior?
I mean, I suppose it gives the criminals something to copy, but whether or not it's the motivation for committing the act, I don't agree with that at all. Like, I remember the thing with the Columbine thing was as well, they started trying to blame Marilyn Manson for his music as well. Judas Priest. So there was a court case where they thought Judas Priest were playing like demonic sort of, or sending out like these demonic dark messages if you played their music backwards and stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's just such a weird avenue to go down is to start blaming art, because that is what it is. It's not there to tell you to do something, to not tell you to do something. It is the expression of someone who has chosen film as their canvas, video games, whatever it might be. And it's always just a really convenient scapegoat for people who don't want to investigate the real issues that are going on, the real issues that people become criminals, which is deprivation, poverty, abuse, all that kind of thing. It's just a nice way to go, oh no, it's these guys making the films. It's this guy with his fucking camera. He's the one who's doing it. No, I'm not into that at all. Obviously, it's tragic and horrific any time it happens, but I think bringing the arts into it is a bit of a joke.
I completely agree. I'm the same. There's nothing to say. Again, I'm not an expert. Obviously, there are elements in media, film, art, games, music that are designed to elicit responses. But I don't know if any mentally healthy person could be affected in such a way by anything that they've seen in the media that would then make them think, well, this makes it okay to go and commit a crime, take life, act in a violent way. Completely agree with you. It's an easy way of pointing the finger and going then. But since the dawn of time, or since the dawn of, reasonable, logical thought, when we got past being instinctual creatures or whatever it is you believe, people have held up other things and gone, it's because of this. It's because of a religion, a book, an event that this person's happened. But like you say, the cause of it goes so much deeper, and it's just really easy to blame something like this for that.
Yep, absolutely. Agreed.
Okay, so we'll move on to the critical reception then, because I'm really interested to get your thoughts on this. You obviously love the film.
I do.
And you haven't seen the critical reception. So what would you say it would be? Because you chose this because you think it's underseen, right? So in terms of rating systems, that's not really come into it for you. So what do you think it gets, roughly,
So if I was going to mark it, I'd be looking high 8s, probably low 9s, maybe, maybe even mid 9s. I think it's just a film that just had such a massive impact on me. But I don't think most other people would feel the same way. I know that a lot of people were kind of not so hot on the intense violence and the abuse and stuff. And the fact really that most people I know haven't seen it, I would suppose probably in the 7s, maybe a mid 7 or a low 7. I go 7.3.
You're not far off.
Okay.
So on IMDb, well, it's not that you're pretty much right. On IMDb, it gets a 7.3 at the time of recording out of 10.
Ah.
This is where it gets interesting for me. On Rotten Tomatoes, the audience gives it 81%. Ooh. So, a little bit higher than IMDb. The critics give it 46%.
What?
Yeah, which I thought was crazy.
What are their complaints?
So, and well, I figured you'd ask that.
Sorry, I'm getting a bit.
So,
Woo,
no,
don't mean to get so emotional.
I agree. 46% is crazy. So
that's a fucking joke.
I mean, but obviously these are kind of 26-year-old reviews from what I can see.
Okay.
Someone said it kind of as a satire. It was a little bit. I'm paraphrasing. It was a little bit heavy-footed, a little bit on the nose. One here says the main problem with the film is that it degenerates into the very thing it criticises. So I suppose they're kind of saying there that in trying to criticise violence and the media portrayal of violent criminals, it just becomes it.
Right, but how else are you meant to make a film? Next.
Well, no, I agree. I think that's. No, not with them, with you. As in, I think that is completely lacking in subtlety. What's this one say? Doesn't know the meaning of moderation or subtlety and opts instead for something that is excessive and self-indulgent. It's as if he wants to shout out the statement, "Look at what I can do. I'm an artist."
I wouldn't agree with that, but go on.
I think the only thing in there that I might consider there was an inch of truth in is that at times it is a little self-indulgent in terms of, like, back to what I was saying, in terms of the stylization and the quick cuts. Having said that, I think that the moderation and a lack of it is the point.
Absolutely.
So I do disagree.
It's not meant to be moderate. How are you meant to depict a young girl getting raped by her dad as moderate? You can't do it. Next.
No, that's it. That's all I got. That's all I got.
Calm down.
So, based on those, bearing in mind the audience gives it around a high 7, what would you say in terms of underrated, underappreciated?
It's hard because I know I'm being biased because I just happen to really like this film, and I know that doesn't necessarily make something a good film just because I like it. But I think I would have gone to 8. I really would have thought so. I would have liked it too. Not that it matters, really.
It's been out for 26 years or something.
Yeah.
So.
Maybe it'll have its second win now.
No, I agree with you. I didn't like it as much as you. It's one that I would watch again, but not in a hurry. And it's quite heavy, I suppose. So would you watch it again? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I'm keen to watch it again. Like soon.
Really, straight, like you put it on when you got home.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Like, after it just reminded me of why I wanted to be a filmmaker.
Well, that's good. For me, I didn't like it as much as you. But 46% is mental.
Oh, that feels
crazy.
harsh. Makes me sad.
I think if a lot of critics were to go back and look at that, they might understand now, with the benefit of hindsight, that the film has had a bit more of an influence. So, in terms of the critical analysis of the film and how it was received when it came out, I'd say it's underrated. And it is probably underseen because I haven't seen it, so it's not one I've asked other people if they've seen because I've never had cause to. But you've obviously asked that question.
Always, every day, everyone I meet.
So, would you agree it's another one for underrated / underseen?
Definitely underrated, definitely.
So, there we have it. Another one for the underrated pilots. Stacking up, isn't it?
We're picking good films, I think.
We are. Underrated ones, which is the point.
Oh, we're nailing it.
Well, it's my turn next week.
Ooh.
So, a little bit of a change of flavour from Natural Born Killers. I'm going to pick a film you might have seen, you might not, called Easy A.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, with Emma Stone.
With Emma Stone in it.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'll say no more. That's what I'm picking. So, if you haven't seen that, please do go away and give it a watch. We'd love to hear from you guys, actually. You guys at home listening to this. So please do get in touch if there's any films that you'd like us to do, anything that you thought about Natural Born Killers or any other films that we didn't cover. Please do get in touch. It's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. All of the social medias. And if you could give us a little review on iTunes, that would be great as well, because it helps the numbers and helps, people hear about us and keep listening. We can keep talking about underrated films and all that jazz. Alice, thank you very much, as ever, for joining me.
Thank you very much, Josh.
It's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
See you next week. Cheerio.